I have a nice insect who has decided to accompany me here at the podium. Beautiful insect. Oh, hello. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, friends, good afternoon. I know you must have been running around like me, so it's very nice to at least sit in one place for the next hour. And today's session is a special one because we will discuss and focus on how we can advance a resilient, nature-positive, and pollution-free future through the upcoming GEF-MEA. At a time when we look at biodiversity loss, increasing pollution, increasing climate pressures converging together, we have an opportunity and responsibility to align our multilateral environment agreements and financing mechanisms to be efficient in its delivery and also impactful. So for our opening, I would like to share a video message from one of our key global partners in advancing innovation and environmental finance. And I have the pleasure to share with you a video from Valerie Hickey, who is the Global Director for Environment, Natural Resources, and the Blue Economy at the World Bank Group. So let's project the video message. Thank you. We're ready. Seems we are not. We are.
Our mission at the World Bank is to end poverty, and there's never going to be a world without poverty in a world with pollution. We all know that. That's why I wish I was with you today in Nairobi having this discussion, because we know that to end pollution, it's going to take money. It's expensive. How expensive? We don't know. But we do know that when it comes to remediation, it's incredibly expensive. Think about polychlorinated biphenyls, for example, PCBs, and how expensive it is to replace transformers as part of grid modernization and to safely dispose of PCBs. Think about lead remediation, for example, whereas minimizing future pollution through policy finance, which can help reduce future air pollution deaths, future deaths from all sorts of pollution, is much less expensive. And because we don't know how expensive it is, we know that we're going to need both public and private money, and we're going to need money at the lowest cost for the longest tenor that can be executed the most quickly. What that means is we need capital coordination. We need to work together. We need to apply the right money to the right problems. We need to make sure that the cheapest money, funding, money that doesn't need to be paid back from philanthropy, from the GEF, for example, can be spent on issues that governments don't want to borrow for, that there are no immediate returns on finance for private companies. Think about absorbing the cost of research and development, for example, for new technologies. Think about institutional strengthening or some policy reforms. And then we want to use the most expensive money in the best way when there is a very clear return on investment. And remember, for governments, a return on investment means economic growth. It means welfare gains. Returns on investment for the private sector are all about risk-adjusted financial returns. Those are two different types of returns, economic versus financial. We can't confuse the two, nor can we confuse the difference between funding, money that doesn't need to be paid back, and financing, money that ultimately does have to be paid back. Because it's going to take both coordinated and attached to the right solution for the right type of pollution, whether it's to remediate past pollution or to prevent future pollution. That is the essence of blended finance. Again, it's about making sure you find on the same deal sheet the right combination of money at the right price for the longest tenor that can be executed the most quickly. It's all about capital coordination. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valerie. I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself, and in case you don't know me, I'm Rolf Fayette. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention. And now I have the honor to invite my colleague and friend, Astrid Schumacher, who is Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, to deliver our keynote. Thank you.
Thank you, Rolf, and I think you rightly say our keynote, and I think we all share these messages. And it's a pleasure to be here and to build on the conversations that have started already yesterday and today, and how we can work with the GEF and how we can work together as we move forward towards another quite momentous year for multilateralism, with the 3 Rio conventions having their COPs, with CMS having a COP at the beginning of the year, with others just concluded and now needing to implement. There's a lot to do. Now, moving from synergies to solutions is an interesting term, because synergies are the solution. And I think that is our key message that we want to get across here. And I don't need to explain to all of you, because you're all environmental experts, that by now the science is really crystal clear and indisputable that the linkages between biodiversity loss, climate change, land degradation, and pollution are such that siloed efforts are really futile. If you live in a house and it was at risk of flooding and of fire, would you invest in building a firewall and making sure it's fireproof? And when you're done with that, you say, well, let's check if it's also water, if it can also keep the water out? Or would you say we have to address these things together? It is plain common sense. And yet in the environment world, for many reasons we were well aware of, for silos that we have ourselves built, and that in many ways have served us well in order to indicate and highlight different aspects of the crisis, we now need to move to the delivery model, and the delivery model is one of common delivery and synergies. So piecemeal actions delivered within institutional or thematic boundaries for convenience or for lack of better options are simply no match for the planetary crisis and its adverse impacts on climate and, of course, on people. So the solutions we must be seeking need to cross these fairly stubborn silos we're all aware of, and we're all in a way guilty of. And I start by myself. I mean, I also think in terms of the Biodiversity Convention, and it is always only the second thought that I think, well, how would Rolf see this problem? Or how would Musunda or Yvonne look at these issues? And how can we bring this shared perspective for better delivery, and in a situation where money gets tighter and tighter, to simply get more bang for the buck, because we cannot afford in any sense of the word to waste money. We have to find solutions that work across planetary boundaries and that work across institutional boundaries. Now, what makes this event so exciting is that all of you in this room are the ones that hold the key in hand to make that happen. If you are equipped with the right resolve, if the member states and parties in our conventions come to us as secretariats and say, we want you to deliver differently, we want you to deliver together, we want you to work with the GEF to privilege joint delivery models and use the ninth replenishment process as an opportunity in that sense, as I believe the GEF is very keen on doing, we can really shift the needle in this global endeavor. So let us then use this space here to craft something not just whole of society and whole of government, but also whole of MEA and whole of UNEA and whole of UNEP approach to delivering the solutions that we all need. And let us discuss how the GEF can help with the required urgencies. Now, I want to say in all of that, this sounds like a tall order, and it is difficult because it means change, it means doing things differently. But we have an institutional framework already in place that can help us and that we can leverage. So starting, for example, with the Biodiversity Liaison Group. That was already founded in 2004. The biodiversity-related conventions were mandated by their COPs to explore coordinated and synergistic action. A decade later, a big step was taken at CBD COP16 when the CBD COP invited governing bodies of the biodiversity-related conventions to provide consolidated funding advice to the GEF. That was the first time that it was done. We in the CBD had the honor to coordinate it. I hope we did a decent job for all of you, to take to the GEF this message of common challenges and shared solutions that we think need to be privileged. So that was a big step forward. And meanwhile, we also have the Joint Liaison Group. So that is the group that brings together the executive secretaries of the 3 Rio conventions. Admittedly, that group has a bit of a checkered history. It has been dormant for a while, but I think you see renewed resolve in all 3 secretariats to come together and to see how we can better serve our parties that are suffering from different planning processes, difficult planning processes, different indicators, different reporting, different monitoring, and then different reporting, and that very often don't manage to do all of the things that they have committed to because these things are different and understanding that with less fragmentation this would be easier. So the Joint Liaison Group has a big job to do, but also needs a strong mandate from the 3 Rio Convention COPs next year to really move together in these processes and maybe develop models of joint planning, joint indicators, joint reporting, and see how we can simplify without compromising on quality and at the same time accelerating our way forward. That is a little bit our dream. That means the focal points of the Rio Conventions, and I hope there are different Rio Convention focal points here. You guys also need to talk to each other. And I was in the government until not so long ago, in that case the European Union. I know that we rarely talked from the Environment Department to the Climate Department 2 floors up. There were different processes, we were just too busy, and so everybody's just too busy. But with this new understanding that we have, that the dollars need to go further, that we have to find ways of privileging solutions that work for more than one agenda, I think we can really make good progress going forward. So synergy flowers are blooming in the field, and maybe just in conclusion to say, and coming back because Rolf is here and he will be annoyed with me because I spoke about climate the whole time, the Biodiversity Convention has a global biodiversity framework. It integrates climate change, but also, and it's quite innovative, it integrates pollution. There's a specific target 7 on pollution, and we were so gratified to see the Minamata Convention and the BRS Convention pick up on that and say, okay, this is also our framework. We can contribute. That is, of course, appreciated by us, but more importantly, you can leverage the framework, and in particular, everybody can leverage next year's COP17, which is global review on how far we got in implementing the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, so that we then know where we have to go further and what is needed. And I think we can all be clear that what is needed and the big nudge that needs to come has to come from funding. And that brings us back to this subject of the discussion, how we can work together, the CBD Secretariat, the BRS Secretariat, the other secretariats, the GEF, the Green Climate Fund, and outline pathways towards a new paradigm of integrated support and integrated delivery. To get there, we need projects that connect NBSUBs, NDCs, NUBs, LDN targets, national plans under BIS, and all of that together. And if countries are making that effort and right on clue the GEF works, and I'm sure the GEF will then also be very happy because we just discussed that in the previous CITES conventions. So with the GEF-9, yes, replenishment is challenging, times are challenging, but our understanding is different, and we think that jointly we can leverage the GEF-9 to work better and more impactful in the future, even if money is scarce, as we know. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Astrid, for these thoughtful points that you've raised, and especially bridging the work that we do in the pollution and waste space, in the work that you do in the biodiversity space, and in the work that you are working with in the climate change space. And of course, there are a lot of examples where we can show where this is actually working. So we're not on fresh territory here. It's just that we need to really engage and have this new mindset of working together. I think the time for silos is long way over, and we need to work together. And here I'm looking at my colleague Musonda. We just signed an agreement. I'm very excited. Musonda is the secretary of the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands. And when we were having all this discussion on plastics, and I said to her, I know, you know, where the plastics are all getting stuck in the wetlands. You know why we don't know? Because they are so thick for us that nobody goes into the wetlands with a camera, or even a drone cannot go in there to see what's happening. And we were right. These are the lungs of the planet, ladies and gentlemen, and this is where all the plastic is getting stuck. What we see in the ocean is the tip of the iceberg. It's stuck in all those big wetlands, and I'm really excited, looking forward to working with you to addressing pollution and conservation in the wetlands. We don't have a lot of time. We're going to have 2 panels today, and I'm excited to start with our first panel, which will be looking at national perspectives and integrated action. And then we'll go to our second panel, is going to look at inviting our heads of MEAs here together with the GEF, and we're going to start digging a little bit deeper into exploring those systemic connections and solutions that has been raised by Astrid. So without any further ado, I have the pleasure to welcome His Excellency, Mr. Matthew Samunda, who is the Minister responsible for water, environment, climate change, and the blue and green economies of Jamaica. What a fantastic job title. You cut across. Exactly. Then I have Her Excellency, Lady MEA, who is the Director General for Ethiopian Environmental Protection Authority, who also cuts across the whole aspects of the environment in Ethiopia. And we have Maheta, I hope I pronounce your name properly, Maheta Yeager, who's the Deputy Director General of the European Commission and International Partnerships, what we call in short DG INPA. And she is, of course, playing a key role in the European Commission, having served senior positions across energy, transport, policy coordination. So she brings in this extensive experience across all the different sectors that we'll be talking about today. And I have also the pleasure to invite Annika Lindblom, who's Director of International Affairs at the Ministry of Environment on Finland, another important partner in this work. And in her work, she's worked in sustainable development, of course, which cuts across all the different sectors, in the circular economy, and of course in chemical safety, which is close to our heart here in BRS. So thank you so much, dear panelists, for joining us. And let's start with our first questions. And Minister, I know you wanted to speak last, but I want to give you the honor of speaking first. Has a small island developing state facing interconnected pressures, as if, I'm sure when you get to your office, because I've been in the same chair as you've been in my past life, what am I going to deal with today? Because there's so many issues on the table, and of course, as you all know, Jamaica just faced one of these worst disasters in its history. And I can just imagine the number of items that you have on your table to deal with. What is the most important improvement that GEF-MEA should make to ensure that integrated financing strengthens both coastal and marine biodiversity, and also addressing the pollution issues that you are facing in Jamaica, such as wastewater, runoff, and so on?
Thank you, Ralph, and good afternoon to my colleagues on the platform, and of course, all of you who have joined us this afternoon. I want to thank both your convention and indeed the CVD for facilitating this discussion. As you mentioned, Jamaica is at a particular interval in its history. It would have gone through the strongest hurricane we've ever faced, what we believe one day will be classified as a first category 6 hurricane. We would have had wind gusts over 250 miles an hour and storm surge over 17 feet. And why I start there, I think will become clear very soon. That would have caused over $8.8 billion of infrastructural damage, which is in line with approximately 41% of our GDP. Now, why it's important to understand the scale of damage in that regard. Oh, and additionally, yes, of course, we've lost lives, but we've also seen damage to 51% of our primary forests. So the very environmental degradation that has facilitated climate change is also further damaging what's left of your pristine forests, what's left of your ecosystems, and certainly your marine environment. But that aside, when one contemplates a country the size of Jamaica, its economic size, and you think of a single event in 24 hours that triggers $8.8 billion of damage, we understand the scale of finance that we need to face the triple planetary crisis. When you juxtapose that against another fund, which has had commitments of $800 million, being the loss and damage fund that we've all celebrated, you understand the scale of the problem that we do have. Now, using this particular event to explain the importance of the work that the GEF-MEA needs to undertake, for me is very personal and very real. The storm's original projected path was to go through was to make landfall in the south central part of the island in a place called Clarendon. It's a large piece of flat land. It's one of our largest plains in Jamaica. Much of it is at sea level or below sea level, but it's particularly populated. Much of our mangrove forest that would have protected this area has been degraded over the last 30 years because of issues, overconsumption, because of poverty issues, pollution issues, certainly with plastic and other solid waste getting caught, and because of poor sewage practices that have affected the water quality. So it's been a perfect storm for that mangrove forest, approximately 10,000 hectares degraded. Now, had this behemoth of a storm gone through the central part of the island, as it was projected to do, I probably wouldn't be able to be here to sit with you for discussions this afternoon. Our death toll would be vastly different. Our infrastructure damage would probably have an additional 0 behind it. So when we discuss the role of the GEF-9, and we understand the importance of pollution remediation, pollution reduction, we understand the importance of restoration of our natural coastal defenses, we see just how important the GEF-9 is going to be. Now, there are varying financial experts that will give you their view on the particular mix that is best, how you crowd in private and public finance, the role of the NGOs, the role of the multilaterals, and all of that is up for debate, and we do need to find the right mix. But there is a point that must be made, certainly for small island developing states and LDCs, and it's around scale. There are troubling signs from some donors as it relates to the GEF-9 replenishment. And we have to take it on frontally, Ralph, because the nature-based solutions required to give small island developing states a chance will not be cheap. The previous intervention from the World Bank, which would have explained the cost of remediation, is one that we know very well. I know you have a lot of time to split between a number of speakers, Ralph. But what I do want to leave you with is just the absolute importance that every voice in this room is used to enhance the message, to strengthen the message that the replenishment is indeed critical for the future of the GEF and certainly for the remediation work, the restoration work that will be undertaken on the GEF-9. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Excellency, we shift now maybe to a continental country, a large country in Africa. And you've been very active, obviously, in the pollution area. What is the primary challenge that Ethiopia today faces in translating your challenges in dealing with waste and pollution regulations into the integrated outcomes that also support biodiversity conservation, for example? I'm sure when you drive around, you see plastic bags and all sorts of everything strewn around the countryside, and that, of course, makes you feel what needs to be done for us to address this. So you have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you, my brother, and good afternoon, everyone. As Mr. Rolf mentioned, that pollution is one of the challenges that we are facing as a continent, at the world, and people say that polluting is much cheaper than clearing the pollution that has been done in the ground. So in the case of Ethiopia, multilateralism, cooperation and financing is an important tool. Besides to this, a few change that has been made in the country with different initiatives, changing proclamations, changing the regulations, especially to make sure that we are addressing the chemical pollution, the industrial pollutions, plastics waste. Those are the areas that Ethiopia is championing, especially starting from February. We will completely ban all single-use plastics in our country. That's a huge milestone that we decide with our proclamation. And introducing the extended producer responsibility, especially for the plastics, has been introduced in action. And with the Clean Ethiopia initiative, which we believe this initiative creating an impact on tackling pollution, especially that comes with chemical waste, plastics, industrial pollutions. Those are the area of tackling those pollution is an important. So majorly when we raise this issue, we already create a foundation on changing the laws, but still implementing is one of the challenge. So on implementation, the lack of finance is one of the area that needs an intervention. And I believe GEF-9 will give an opportunity to elaborate not only GEF-9, but other international partners will allow us, give us those fundings, especially to create a technical capacity, to create a capacity building for the technical teams in the country, to make sure that the private sectors is involving in circular economy investments, so that we can create the green job and pollution-free country. So majorly within in line to this, some of the chemicals still needs technology transfers. And those technologies need to be adopted from different countries, and making sure that Africa will go get those technology to implement in the ground. So to make sure that nature positive and pollution free futures will allow us, to create more champions in the country, and making sure that those in need, especially vulnerable communities, will act as a culture. So in some of the environment protection is important to change the livelihood and the day-to-day activity that we are doing now in the country, either in the world. So we launched the Clean Ethiopia initiative, which is a theme of creating a clean Ethiopia that can be cultivated as a culture. So this needs a huge investments, a huge campaign, a huge technical support, a huge private sector involvement. So this all needs finance. This all needs priority. So we believe that mobilizing those and making sure that the multilateral cooperation that we start with BRS Convention, Minamata, this will help us to have a refined regulatory frameworks, as waste pollution is a transboundary issue. It's not only about the country that we are facing. So we need to mobilize those things, and we need to have a compliance and standard that will give a huge direction to all countries to implement in the ground.
Thank you so much, Excellency. Now I turn my attention to Marietta from the European Commission. As you know, and probably you've heard about the Global Euro Programming, the Global Gateway Initiative. I will invite her to share with us how this approach can help accelerate win-win investments in areas such as circular economy, low chemical or chemical-free agriculture, ecosystem-based remediation. I've given you a long list here. But how can it help us to deliver benefits for biodiversity and pollution reduction?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Ministers, Excellencies, dear Astrid. Thank you for organizing or co-organizing this important panel. I think that it's basically the most important question of today, the future of financing. And basically, I've been very honored by your invitation, and even more to basically reassure you that EU and DG INPA, we remain committed to environmental multilateralism, and also very proud to say that we remain predictable and reliable donor when it comes to the total climate finance. For the last 3 years, the EU with member states basically stayed the leading financier with 28 billion per year. And I hope that we will continue to support your action, because our commitment is fully compatible with the Global Gateway Strategy. What we would like to achieve is that through the Global Gateway, which is basically EU strategic external investment action plan, I would say, basically to boost investment in quality and sustainable infrastructure in our partner countries. But we all know that for the investments to come to the country, we need also a very reliable and stable regulatory framework, as Minister said, and that's why your work it's so valuable. And basically, a global gateway is our attempt to crowd in the private sector. Because what is clear, ladies and gentlemen, is that with the public money, we will not make it. You know about the decrease in international finance architecture. We need new donors. We need other actors to come in, but mainly we need private sector, because we are using all our tools in the toolbox, mainly grants and technical assistance, but we need to go into innovative finance with the blending and the guarantees. And we use more and more innovative finance, and we just discussed before how we can use our knowledge and partnership in order to do it. We do it with all our financial institution partners, especially thank you for the World Bank. We just signed another, I would say, very important agreement in enhanced cooperation on many projects, including the projects from your area. And I would say that only with the partnership, as was stated before, we can manage. And I'm also very, very happy to hear, Astrid, that you are talking about synergies and interconnections, because this is also the way to lower the transaction cost and administrative cost. And as I would say, partner of you, we very much appreciate that. But of course, all the investments must come with the strict principles of good governance and transparency and democratic values. And I would say the most importantly, they need to be green and clean. I mean, that is something that I want you to remember from my speech. So whatever we would do in the future is green and clean. And let me give you two examples, especially on the circular economy one, what we are doing in order to improve the affordability and accessibility of the essential materials. I mean, we have 4 actions, and we are following the next 4 steps that I'm going to share with you. First one is we build awareness and knowledge, making the case for circular economy very transparent and very economy transition. And we support the policy and regulatory reform to create environment for circular economy, which we believe it's very important. And what we really, really want to do is facilitate the access to finance for the circular business model or infrastructure. And here is another invitation to you to work with us. And ultimately, we support circular practices across value chain, notably through the private sector support that I mentioned before. And our brand new EU Circular Economy Resource Center is a key backbone for our circular economy partnership. So I all invite you to work also with our Finnish friends in Sitra in order to make it very successful, and I'm very happy to have my Finnish colleague here. And secondly, on biodiversity, we are convinced that conservation can lead to the creation of sustainable economic opportunities. That's why Astrid will have so much to do, and basically generating jobs and revenues for the local communities. As we are discussing that we need to create more jobs, and you all know that the World Bank basically said that we would need 1.2 billion jobs by 2050, and that we are maybe able to create 400 million. That means that we need to redouble our efforts to create jobs, and I think through the biodiversity this is a unique opportunity, and we can prove it with one program that we are very proud of. It's called Natura Africa, and we promote the landscape approach in over 50 high biodiversity landscapes. And I can tell you that Virunga National Park in DRC serves us as a model for this combination of conservation and large-scale investment. I'm more than happy to share the details about this program with you, but since my time is over, I'm going to give the floor to the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marietta, for joining us. Thank you so much. Okay, Anika, after hearing all these great presentations, as a country that emphasizes safe chemicals management, circular economy, certainly, we know Finland is leading in that area. How can the GEF-9, backed by committed donors, scale up integrated investments that jointly address chemicals, waste, pollution, and biodiversity?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for inviting Finland to this very important panel. Unfortunately, my minister is still traveling to Nairobi and she cannot attend this panel, but I'm happy to convey some of the messages from my country. So I think what we have heard here today and also in many other occasions, we talk a lot about integrated solutions and interconnected challenges. And that's great. The GEF-8 has shown that GEF projects and programs often generate win-win benefits across multiple environmental areas, underscoring the integrated nature of GEF investments, and we certainly commend that. So what does interconnectedness mean in concrete terms? We found out, for instance, I think it's an excellent example that in the recent 8th comprehensive evaluation of GEF, that pollution reduces ecosystem resilience, while biodiversity loss undermines natural processes like water purification and soil health, which for their part are critical for mitigating pollution impacts. So this is kind of an interaction or vicious circle that can create feedback loops that exacerbate environmental degradation. And these issues the GEF has addressed already during its previous programming cycle, and we are really happy for that. But as for GEF-9, it is good to keep in mind, of course, that the details of the negotiations are still ongoing, but I can share some general messages from the Finnish side here, and responding to this question also. So starting from the BRS Synergies process, Finland has consistently championed for stronger synergies between the MEAs, and that is perhaps because we are such a small country and we have to be effective. We have to work together to really reach our common goals. And policy coherence has been our guiding principle in environment policy and respectively in the implementation, for instance, of the 2030 agenda. So that has been one of the key elements in our work. Another guiding principle for us has been the comprehensive participation, so the whole of government and whole of society approach. And in that respect, Finland welcomes the strategic direction of GEF-9, which places strong emphasis both on policy coherence as well as on country ownership, especially promoting whole of government and whole of society approaches at national, regional, local level, for instance, in the form of country platforms. And in fact, I attended the GEO-7 press conference earlier today, and indeed, these two principles, policy coherence and whole of society approach, were mentioned many times as key solutions. So we are on the same page in all these events, which is great. So whole of government platforms, which normally mean, of course, interministerial coordination mechanism, they can ensure that different sectors work together and also align policies and budgets for integrated outcomes. And we really emphasize good planning, and that is key ways of ensuring that investments jointly address chemicals, waste, pollution, biodiversity, circular economy, and so forth. So in the GEF-MEA negotiations, Finland has emphasized that investments need to come not only from the public funds of traditional donors, but also from new donors and the private sector, as my colleague from the European Commission just mentioned. And a strong private sector engagement can unlock additional capital, drive innovation, and scale marketplace-based solutions. Because the reality, of course, is that the public funding alone cannot meet our global environmental goals. Maybe I leave it in that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annika. So we've reached the end of our first panel, so I'd like to thank all the members of our panel deeply for your contribution. And I will just give a one-sentence summary, if you permit me, from all the panelists. The minister from Jamaica, restoration. But I think he added restoration for better. In the restoration, we need to bring in adaptation. We need to bring in nature-based solution. We need to think how we design for these types of extreme weather situations. Of course, climate change included. Excellency, the MEA said we need financing for supporting our institutions, for organizing ourselves to have a clean country. And then that was reinforced by the EU. And I like the word, green and clean. They rhyme, green and clean. And I think this is a central philosophy behind the Global Gateway, which I think is very, very important as we look at the connections now in the investment strategy of the European Union. And then, of course, we finished with your key points and takeaway lessons is whole of society. I love this, whole of society. And MEAs, we need to drive this message of whole of society engagement and whole of government engagement. So thank you so much. And with your permission, I'll allow you to leave the podium and invite our next set of thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, these are our MEA champions. Yes, the MEA champions. Yes, CITES, Ramsar, Minimata, CMS. Yes. And of course, the GEF, cheese. I need you up here. So allow me to introduce our distinguished panelists for this second round of panel discussion. I would like to introduce Yvonne Higuero from the CITES Convention, Musunda Mamba from the Ramsar Convention, Monika Stankiewicz from the Minimata Convention, Amy, I don't see your surname very often, Amy Frankel from the CMS Convention, and she's also, I don't see your surname, Aoki from the GEF, the Global Environment Facility. There you go. So, similar to our first panel, I would like you to keep to very short and quick and sweet answers. Because we're running a bit of time, out of time, so I'm going to go straight to the first question. And my colleague down my corridor in Geneva, Monika, what institutional or financial barriers still prevent pollution-focused MEAs from accessing cross-focal area funding? And how can the GEF-9 help us to overcome this?
Thank you so much, and good day, everyone. I mean, that's my best setting to be with my colleagues from MEAs and my friends. This is really a space we take with full force because we basically have been integrating, talking with each other already for so long, and it's really a pleasure to see this is now coming through. I would like to start by referring to the recent OECD report on environmental outlook on the triple planetary crisis. And in this report, they took national reports from 10 countries around the world, and they concluded that as far as integration between biodiversity and climate change is concerned, there is a progress. But as far as pollution, climate, pollution, biodiversity is concerned, this is lagging. And that's, I think, the main message we would like to, or I would like to reinforce during this event, that we need to do more to bring pollution agenda and be in par with these other agendas. And however, I see things changing. The Global Biodiversity Framework with its target, it's imperfect, but it's there. And the approach to incorporate all the MEAs under this one umbrella, it has worked, at least for the Minamata Convention, I believe for BRS as well. We see our governing bodies starting to talk to each other. On our side, Minamata, BRS, we have all the needed decisions already in place. The mandate is in place. So things are moving forward. Now, regarding your specific question about the existing barriers and now upcoming GEF-9, basically we have few months to maybe push a bit more for pollution to be more prominently integrated with other agendas. So I will be very specific in this regard, and I would like to start with the integrated programs, which are an excellent idea that has been working for some time, but we need this to work better for mercury and for chemicals. And to be even more specific, we have integrated programs on Amazon, Congo, and critical forest biomes, and we see mercury there, just recently getting there. So we need to reinforce these chemicals mainstreaming to this particular program, but also to pollution-free supply chains and stable cities moving forward. There are other integrated programs, Global Wildlife for Development, Blue and Green Islands, and Food Systems, IPs. Here, the progress has not been as good, and we would like to, again, hope for a better reflection of chemicals and pollution in those. And then to go with it, the rigorous reporting on mercury and POPs and pollution mitigation and avoidance, because that's where we really are sure that these connections have been made and they are working on the project level. One obstacle is what has been also mentioned in another event is how things are organized on a national level, and whether operational focal points for GEF would prioritize chemicals in par with other areas. And we really hope for some work to be done in this regard, because we see, and maybe what could help is to not to frame POPs or mercury as a standalone issue, but really a driver of high-value co-benefits to these other areas. And one example I could give you, the recently approved GEF projects on the cement industry in 2 countries, where there are co-benefits accounted for mercury and for greenhouse gas emissions. And that's clear. And then once these projects are done, we will have a clear picture of how those co-benefits have been realized. Then a specific point on core indicators. I've been bringing this for some time already. When we reduce mercury, we are talking about tons. When we reduce some other chemicals, it might be hundreds of tons. And when we think of degraded land, it's hectares and multiplied by some 100. For mercury, 1 ton is a lot. It brings so many human health benefits, environmental benefits. So indicators need to put us on the same understanding, so it doesn't seem like it's negligible. It's not. It brings a lot of benefits to ecosystem services benefits. And one specific still issue I would like to bring, that for addressing mercury chemicals pollution, we need to do it together with industry. So if industry are not willing to, or risk averse, they have to come with a bigger money than GEF brings. And that might be one obstacle that I think GEF is really doing well to overcome. And the last point I would like to bring is about it's an idea, I don't know whether maybe it's too late for GEF-9 to pursue it, but we know there is this star allocation, which is fixing allocation to countries for climate change, biodiversity, waters, I think, water. For chemicals, we don't have it, so if there could be some sort of a matching mechanism for those countries who are willing to use some of the star allocation for biodiversity, but then they would like to bring mercury, but then they could use some of the allocation from chemicals and waste to make it work for them. So we are not, from national point of view, competing with those who prefer to work in the area which is star allocated, let's put it that way. And then
Sorry,
the
Monica.
last, I'm finishing with the last sentence to say that also to put value to avoided pollution. So whether we can measure also pollution that has been avoided, and apologies for speaking probably too long. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much. I was once asked the questions is where is chemicals and waste in the sustainable development goals? And I promptly said, in all of them. So when you see an integrated program, ask, where is pollution and waste and chemicals in that integrated program? And the answers will respond to you. Because of course, our national global discourse has been on climate change and biodiversity. But let's ask ourselves that question. And I'm sure you will see that this pollution, consumption, chemicals is cutting across, because everything that we have in this room is a chemical product. Everything we walked out the minute we are using a chemical product. My next colleague, we're running out of time, Musonda. Has biodiversity outcomes depend on addressing their key drivers, including pollution? What's the most essential shift needed in GEF-MEA so that biodiversity financing is systematically linked to reducing pollution pressures under MEA mandates, such as the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework? Big question, but I'm sure you have the answer.
It is a big question. Thank you very much, Rolf. I'll be very quick. I think if you look at where we're seated here, and if Astrid was sitting on the other end, you see this is the epitome of synergies, including yourself. Our institutions have specific frameworks, they have specific structural political processes, the same member states, the same contracting parties coming to the table in these different dynamics. Now for us as a wetland convention, of course, we are the oldest multilateral environmental agreement, not in the UN. However, where the chemicals exist is where? In wetlands, from source to sea. I live in Switzerland, and the Swiss Alps is the birthplace of the Rhone River. And because, obviously, to protect the ice, you cover it with plastic. And there's micro and nanoplastics finding its way all the way to the Camargue as the Rhone River enters the sea. So this political conversation is necessary. And I'm glad that I'm speaking after Monica, because we are the convention of wetlands and waterfall. Birds migrating across massive landscapes. The world was very shocked to find that in the remotest part of the world there was mercury, because birds stop somewhere to feed, to rest, to drink, and this pollution is right there. And so the state of wetlands absolutely matter, which is why we as a convention have a 6th joint work plan right now with the CBD, and working very closely, Target 2 and 3 of the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework. We're working very closely with CITES. We have an agreement on that with Minamata. We just spoke earlier this morning on the issue of connectivity with CMS. We're working very closely with all MEAs, and you mentioned at the very beginning on this joint framework. So when we talk about wetlands, we're talking about biodiversity. We're talking about life as we know it. Colleagues, the issue of chemicals is a matter of life and death. For nature, for people. Now coming to Jeff very quickly, I'll just say in one of the regions where we've been working in Uzbekistan, for instance, and Kazakhstan, it has taken the GEF to actually implement some restorative projects for the Aral Sea. Now, for those of you that may not know, the cotton that you may be wearing could be coming from the Aral Sea because it's grown there. And when the drying of the Aral Sea happened, the chemical composition in the dust was out of this world, making people sick. So these institutional frameworks, and what Monica mentioned earlier, industry, we need to have industry in this conversation because they're absent. I mean, and a lot of times they're absent in this discussion here because we're talking to ourselves and like-minded and government. Industry need to be at the table, and they also need to be held to account. And that's what we need to push through the synergy conversations, but also through the work that is actually happening on the ground, and the people that live there every day and tell us what the situation truly is.
Thank you very much. I was asked the question one day, what is the most important issue facing humankind as a civilization? And I said, two. I have three, but two are important. One is pollination, because we need food. And the amount of pesticides and chemicals we're using is destroying the very insects that do pollinate our plants, and also the environment and the nature. And the second one, is a big bomb: fertility. The ability to produce kids and children, and for animals to produce their own progeny. I'm serious. And the main culprit in this is chemicals and pollution. Economy is part of it, but chemicals and pollution is. I now turn to my friend, Amy, from the Convention of Migratory Species. You see, all these things are linked together. How can national and regional biodiversity financing processes under the GEF-9 become more inclusive and cross-sectoral and aligned with the chemicals and waste issue?
Okay, thank you very much, Rolf. And I want to say, I just confirmed this panel. It's amazing because we are actually from Asia, North America, Europe, Africa, and South America. So we have, and Seychelles thrown in, so we have a States too. So we have really the whole world covered here. No, it's great to be here. First, the GEF is not the financial mechanism to CMS, but through what Astrid talked about, and also the fact that CMS objectives are so integrated into the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, as well as the GEF-8 integrated programming approaches, CMS parties do get GEF financing to support CMS-related mandates. In terms of pollution, so I think you've heard me talk a lot about our State of the World's Migratory Species report. The top two threats it found are habitat loss and also overexploitation. But number 3 is pollution. And we don't talk about that so much. But we have a lot of work on pollution and a lot of different types of pollution. For example, I'll do a quick list: pesticides used in agriculture, lead in ammunition, POPs that build up in the fatty tissue of marine mammals, plastics, including in river basins, that choke and drown aquatic species and become food for seabirds, noise from shipping and industrial operations, and light pollution in cities that kills millions of birds all over the world each year, really more close to billions. But most of the GEF focus for CMS is not about pollution. So if we're thinking about integration, what do we need to do? A couple of ideas. I actually think in this discussion on synergies, the GEF is really uniquely positioned to actually help countries on the ground with synergies, because they can work across the different GEF focal areas, as well as the integrated programs and new instruments to really make those connections. So and they also have the STAP, the science platform. So I would say one would be to really increase the extent to which GEF programming is focused on priorities that are science-based, and look at those in a complex way. So it's not just by, each area, biodiversity, the house, integration. So that's one idea. Another is, if you've got a GEF project, don't forget to add these other elements. So if there's an element on GBF, we would want to make sure that something about migratory species is brought in. So it's just sort of making that the checkbox would help to get there. Another point I want to make, the last point, is about the nature of CMS. So CMS exists because one country alone cannot succeed in addressing its conservation issues for migratory animals. They have to work across their national boundaries. But the way the GEF is currently set up is largely driven by national-based priorities. And so to actually work, at one time in history, there were more regional programs. And for CMS, we need that. And we are trying to find creative ways so that, for example, we could convene countries to say we really care about this same priority, and then help them put that as a priority in their STAR allocation. But it takes a lot of work. And so I really think we need to start to think again about regional approaches where they make sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amy. We now move to Yvonne, my colleague just one floor down from our building in Geneva.
Yet we see each other more when we're away from Geneva than
Exactly.
we do when we're in Geneva. Unfortunately, this is the fact. of our lives, and same with Musonda and Monica, who are also nearby. But we take advantage of these moments to catch up and reinforce our connection and our working together as MEAs and finding commonalities and working on the common goals that all of the MEAs have. So I've been really happy to hear some of the interventions from others where we talk about having to work with industry and the private sector, and where we have to work across sectors. And it's not only the sectors like chemicals or pollution and land degradation and climate change and biodiversity, but also with the productive sectors. And this is how we bring industry into play on the work that we do, because we have to think about what happens with agriculture, what happens with forests. And this is something that we discuss a lot in CITES. So to say a little bit about, I think we have to say something about how do we present cases to ensure that we have integrated financing with the GEF, and especially for us as a CITES, we don't receive a GEF. GEF is not our financial mechanism, so we have to find ways, and I think the Global Biodiversity Framework, the Economie Mondiale Global Biodiversity Framework, is very helpful for bringing us together, because we are all working towards those goals, and that way we can attract GEF financing that will also benefit CITES, that will benefit CMS, that will benefit Ramsar. So I'll start with a little story, and I'll try not to be too long, Rolf. But something that happened, we just finished our COP in Uzbekistan last week, COP 20 of CITES, and one of the milestones that happened was the recognition that there are two species of African elephant. One is the savanna species, and the other is the forest, African forest species. And very interestingly, and I won't go into the details of the gut digestive processes of the forest elephant or their large-sized dung, but these processes actually help in how, because of seed dispersal, they're able to make sure that the trees that are grown in this forest are a type of wood, thick wood, that can conserve a lot of carbon. Unfortunately, what is happening, and what we've seen in the last IUCN assessment in 2021, that over the last 3 generations of these forest elephants, we have lost 80% of the population. So we are very concerned about this, and we think, how do we, as CITES, we are concerned about the survival of this species, of the African forest elephant, but not only because it's an iconic mammal, but also because of the functions that it has in these forests, in making sure that they can resist climate change, that they can have ecosystem resilience, maintain these forest ecosystems. So we have to work to make sure that these integrated programs between biodiversity and climate change can also give what I like to say, similar to ASID, a bigger bang for our buck. That we make sure that at the national level, those focal points who are working on climate change and who are working on biodiversity can bring these stories, can bring this evidence about how important it is to conserve the African forest elephant, and not only because it's an important species, but because of the functions it does in terms of climate change. So that's one example. Now we're going towards the examples of involving chemicals, involving mercury. I'll also use an example of mercury for gold mining. Especially the artisanal gold mining, mercury is used for these activities, and causes huge damage to water, huge damage to soil, huge damage to ecosystems, to trees. Now, bringing also the issue of industry, bringing also the issue of people and livelihoods and communities. If we think that they depend, for example, on marine species where you can have chemical runoff like mercury that can do tremendous damage to marine species, to aquatic species, that provide not only for their livelihoods, but their actual subsistence of food, we have to be able to put those together to understand if we don't do something about mercury, we are going to harm biodiversity, we are going to harm those marine species. It can also be in terms of trees, in terms of timber. The chemical runoff, how can it affect, in terms of agricultural lands, in terms of this gold mining of mercury, how it can affect the forest, how it can affect very important commercially valuable trees that also sustain not only livelihoods of people, but also economies, especially in developing countries. And I think we have to bring this story to the fore, that we are talking about conservation, we are talking about sustainable use, but we are talking about economies of many countries that are damaged, that are hurt by the fact that we have this pollution and how it affects biodiversity. And I think the best way then to be able to get everybody on board, to get industry on board, to get other sectors on board, to get the GEF on board in terms of integrated financing and integrated programming, to have the focal points work at the national level together is by showing this evidence that if you don't work on one, you're going to damage the other, and making sure that when you're thinking of working on climate change, to ensure that you're also going to be working on biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. You know something? I'm going to tell you a secret today. It's not really a secret, but it's going to be. Nature is connected. But we humans, we become disconnected. And that's why today we turn to the indigenous people. Because they are still connected. We're displacing them, we're moving them out. Because humans have higher ambitions, we want more phones, we want more critical minerals, we want more data centers. And we become disconnected with our natural environment. But what all these colleagues have said here, experts in their own field, we need to reconnect, because nature is already connected, and if we disconnect from nature, and that will be the peril that we will bring ourselves to. And I think those conventions together makes those connections, and we need to work hard. Policymakers, NGOs, civil society, we need to work together to strengthen and work out those connections. I've left the last word for you, Chiz. After hearing from the national governments, from other donors, and from the MEAs, what have you got for us?
Well, thank you so much for organizing this session, Rolf, and the Astrid and all the executive secretaries. I feel like I stumbled upon the high-profile, high-level champions for the GEF and the replenishment in this room, and it's very encouraging to hear. A lot of things that have been said today is what we really are trying to reflect in the current programming strategy, as well as policy directions that are being negotiated in the replenishment period. Look, from our side, we serve 6 conventions, and we don't take favorites. Right? They're all important. And we are trying to address the national priorities and building a system within the GEF so that the national priorities that would cut across all the MEAs that they're parties to can be addressed with the GEF support. And that support, which at the end of the day, I have to say, is probably not sufficient to even scratch the surface, but it can be the catalyzer to pull in additional resources from the private sector, the national governments, bilateral donors, so on and so forth. So I think how we position the GEF in the GEF-9 period, and how we do this with integration in multiple benefits in mind, and how the GEF as a financial mechanism for 6 conventions can do that without sacrificing, if you will, our role to serve each and every one of you, the conventions, in an equal manner. I think that's a challenge we have been trying to address. Integration, we heard already a lot about the integrated programs. We are proposing to go ahead with the integrated programs with 8 programs. Some of them really should be the ripe grounds to address chemicals and waste elements. Monica, what you said is, I think, entirely true. We have been really trying to have integrated programs. I do think fundamentally the synergy among Rio conventions are easier for the countries to grasp and for the benefits to be really articulated and to have a cross-cutting synergistic and systemic impacts. Making sure that we have space to do that sufficiently with the Minamata Convention as well as the Stockholm Convention I do think, is a challenge that we need to address. And we have been moving towards in that direction, and I completely take your point about not tons be the judge across everything we do. We're cognizant of that. Another element that I wanted to highlight is that biodiversity is not distributed evenly around the world. I mean, that's just a fact, right? And there are spaces where biodiversity of global significance are present and areas where they're not. So I think for us to also be realistic and very focused is to really look for those places, systems, ecosystems, regions, and what have you, where we can have the biggest bang for the buck, not just for biodiversity and biodiversity-related conventions, but with the chemicals and waste conventions perspective in mind. And I think that's another challenge that we need to be taking on as the GEF as a whole. Last but not least, if you look at the portfolio wide in the GEF and GEF-8 and the recent progress we've made, chemicals and waste projects are the ones that have really been successful catalyzing and leveraging private sector resources. And I think there are certain lessons learned as well as targeted interventions that could also generate a lot of good lessons as well as entry points for biodiversity as well as land degradation and climate change mitigation portfolio. So we're keen to really understand what those lessons are and do that in a more systemic way. I manage one fund called the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund. Right now, that is the only fund within the GEF family of funds that has all sources of financing to be able to contribute towards the GEF support. And I will tell you, it's not easy to work with the private sector to turn them around. And I think somebody said they're not around the table in negotiations, right? It's not all that easy for us to also work with philanthropies and other stakeholders that are very important as not just partners, but potential financing sources. So we also need to think about how to do that in a more comprehensive as well as practical way moving forward. Co-financing, leverage financing, as well as trying to come up with other types of trust funds and arrangements to enable countries to access additional resources in the GEF-9 period and beyond. I think that's also very important for the Synergy agenda. So with that, I will finish, and thank you to all of you for being such a great champions of, cadre of champions of the GEF. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Cheese, and please convey our support to Carlos Manuel. We are on board. We're supporting you. We are looking forward to an exciting GEF-9. Higher replenishment, of course. We have to be ambitious, despite the challenges we have. So we are behind you. We have our third, I think, replenishment meeting coming up in Bonn early next year. And I hope with this discussion we've been able to help both you and also the community here, which is also including both donors and recipients of the GEF, to really start reflecting on how we can make GEF-9 even better. And I think that's the way we can move forward. And mobilizing the private sector, it has become a priority. It's a non-argument anymore. I think we need to find ways to bridge with the private sector. And certainly in the pollution and chemicals area, which is $4 trillion, I'm talking $1 trillion, even more probably. My statistics is outdated. Market size. Come on, we can do things there. So we've run out of time. So I'd like to thank you. Just in quick summary, take-home messages is multilateral cooperation remains indispensable. We need to cooperate multilaterally because pollution knows no borders. Migratory species knows no borders. CITES species, sorry to pick that way, knows no borders. Even Ramsar species and habitats knows no borders. We were surprised. I mean, we did some research like 30, 35 years ago. We found the coral polyps coming all the way from Solomon Islands, ends up in the Seychelles. Can you imagine how these little things travel with ocean currents, and corals falls under the Ramsar Convention as well? It's proven today the whole world is connected. Let's connect. So the final point is that, I mentioned it, is public money can go so far. And let's use the public money to capitalize further mobilization from the private sector. So I'll stop here. We've run out of time, but thank you so much for being patient through 2 panels. But I think we've unpacked quite a number of important issues here. And again, wishing the GEF the very best with GEF-9. And we are all very eager to see a successful outcome to GEF-9 because that will give us the propeller to continue our work and to continue to connect. So thank you very much. Have a nice evening and see you soon. And there's snacks outside, I'm told. So pick up a snack when you go out.